Okay, so now we have a panel moderated by Vesna Manojlovic. Vesna, please. And her guests are Jennings, Daniele Bovio, Daniel Karrenberg, and Niall O'Reilly.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vesna. On the behalf of the program committee, I will be a moderator of this session. In the Southeastern Europe region, we have this tradition by now that we look at the history of the internet. So we had very interesting panels before, and at this time, since we are in Greece, which is a cradle of the Western civilization, it's just appropriate to continue with this historical context. And even to introduce some prehistory, because the name of this panel is how it all started. And we were also lucky to have the organization called EARN celebrate their own existence the weekend before. So then we invited them to share with us their historical insights so that we, or even more the newer generations that are only starting now, can learn from their experiences. So I will leave the panelists now to do their own talking. Thank you. No, I will sit over there.
Okay, hello everyone. I am Daniele Bovio, like Vesna said. I'm an Italian. For people that don't know me, because I'm very ancient, I am among the founders of the Italian Academic Research Network called GAR. I then am a former EARN technical manager. I was the EARN Network Operation Group chairman while it existed. I also happen to chair a RIPE working group about maps. We were trying to map the network back then. It was so small that it would fit in an A4 page anyway. I am a co-author of RFC 1580, and I'm currently retired from networking. But this association, this network, started exactly 40 years ago, so we decided to have a celebration for the anniversary. So EARN means European Academic and Research Network. It started in '84, and it was the first multi-vendor computer communication network in Europe. The internet didn't exist back then, especially in Europe. So this weekend, a group of old-timers, like Vesna said, met at the hotel to share some memories, food, drinks, and to celebrate, of course. We had talks recounting our EARN an impact on nation networking, development somewhere, professional careers, and private lives. The four of us were there 40 years ago. And here during the weekend, and we are now here to give you a short overview, basically, of where and how it all started. And a summary of the lessons we learned, the positive, the negative, the mistake we made, and to give you the opportunity to ask any question you may have about the past. Now, Dennis was supposed to start talking about the past.
The past. I was born in, is microphone working satisfactorily? Oh, I should introduce myself. Of course, I am Dennis Jennings. I'm the old man here in the room. I was born in 1945, and I like to think of things in terms of decades. And for the first decade of my life in terms of technology, the world was really interested in computing and invented the stored program computer. In the second decade of my life, the world was heavily developing operating systems and local communications for those computers. In the third decade of my life, the idea of connecting people and computers together was the topic du jour. This was where the technology was hitting the road. The rubber was hitting the road. This was the exciting part of computing in that in that third decade of my life, which means from 65 to 75, there was absolute ferment of activity and papers and so on. In that decade, in 73, Vince Cerf and Bob Kahn published the TCP/IP initial paper describing the Internet idea and the Internet protocol. But in relation to the European Academic Research Network, the idea of building networks for the academic community also became the topic of interest. And there was a lot of activity in Europe. The first country to begin to do this was probably the United Kingdom, with the CERCnet, Science and Engineering Research Network, and JANET, the Joint Academic Network. But there was a lot of activity and thinking about it, which really began to take shape in the fourth decade of my life, from 30 to 40, with the developments of the things like EARN. So let me tell you a little bit about the European Academic Research Network. And to do that, I have to backtrack a little bit to a network called BitNet, because it's their network. And that was a network that was started by a man called Ira Fuchs in Princeton and Graydon Friedman in Yale. Because they had learned of IBM's internal research communication network called VNet. And VNet took mainframes as the routers and took the spooling software for spooling to printers as the mechanism, and took the NJ, network job entry, as the extension of JCL, job control language, to build out of existing components a network. So what the IBM did, it was called VNet, where they got a leased line from one computer to the next. They pretended that the other computer at the end was a printer, and they sent files to it. And that computer, in turn, could connect to other computers, pretend that those other computers were printers, and send files to it. And that way they introduced file transfer and email between mainframes. And it was an extraordinary success. There were eventually thousands of computers connected to VNet, internal to IBM. Ira Fuchs learned about this and decided, hey, that's a cool idea for the computer centers in universities in the United States to connect together. And so a shared community of computer center managers started to do this. And that was called BitNet. Tremendously successful. And that started in 1981, I think. Shortly after that, IBM became interested in sponsoring a network like this in the poor cousin area, which was Europe. And Europe was the poor cousin in terms of networking, especially for academics, because communications was controlled by those ghastly people, the PTTs, the Post, Telegraph, and Telecommunications organizations, who had a strict monopoly on communication of any kind, except voice, between organizations. And that meant that the lease lines that were needed for networking were extremely expensive. The alternative was the initial packet switched networks, which was extremely expensive. And so IBM decided to sponsor the lines to connect main computers in each country in Europe and create the equivalent of BitNet, the European Academic Research Network. And that's how it all started. And I'll let my colleagues tell you a little bit more about how that developed. Daniele.
Oh, I've done my part.
Oh.
It's Daniel's side.
Well, the plan was actually that Niall is next, because you were supposed to talk about what we learned from this.
Oh, well, I'll talk about that later.
Very well. The next part of it was that we had to build, to correspond to IBM's investment in lines, we had to build a community which could actually make it into an operational network. And this took a number of things. One of the interesting things about the IBM communication software was that it was actually open source. It wasn't free open source as we would expect today. It was proprietary open source. But it meant that it was very easy for enthusiasts in running Unix machines or commercial companies, competitors of IBM, to make software that emulated the let's send it to a printer down the road, or let's send it to a computer down the road that we pretend is a printer. And so not just IBM machinery could be accommodated in this network. And this phenomenon was already happening in BitNet, so we just had to emulate it in Europe. And so we built in each country we appointed in each country a local technical coordinator to deal with the institutions, the other universities downstream of the main site where the IBM line was landing. And so we built a cooperative community to make it all happen. IBM provided resources, the community provided operational skills and procedures, and IBM even sponsored those because there was a support team at IBM's research center in Heidelberg to do that. Now, there was a lot of political pressure, on the other hand, from the CCITT? Yes. The CCITT, the Commission in Brussels, various places, that we really should have a plan to move from the IBM lines to the public packet switch network. And ERN was persuaded to move in that direction, and we had a pilot OSI networking project that I was on the implementation team for. And at a certain moment then, the European Commission decided that they would sponsor a backbone. So this backbone was to replace the IBM-sponsored lines, but the sort of administrative structures around the backbone and the relationship. The backbone was going to connect national research and education networks, and then the ERN sites in the countries would connect to the NRENs, and there were too many different administrations in the process, and it became horrible, and that didn't work. But in the meantime, we had built a community. This community had the same kind of ethos of collaboration, pragmatism that we see in RIPE today. And I think that's the moment for me to pass over to Daniel.
Okay. Well, since we have more time, I'll also talk a bit about history. The interesting thing about this get-together of people who did something 40 years ago is, of course, to swap old stories and see old friends again. And there's always a danger of actually just talking about the good old times. We did a lot of that. But what was interesting was that all of us were also thinking about the current problems and the current state of the network. And I'm going to tell in my next intervention, not this one, about that, because we have more time. Is that right, Vesna? Yes. Okay. Fine. So I'll talk also a bit about the history. My role in this, and I'm born in 1959, so I'm a youngster. The decade of the 80s was about this kind of stuff. Networking was not like a universal utility like it is now, but it was initiatives like ERN to connect IBM machines. But there were other communities as well that were separate. Like I was part of the UUCP community, which was basically a much less organized and self-funded, not so much sponsored community of Unix users, and there was Unix before Linux, yeah, of Unix users who actually did something quite similar. And the structures, then there was the high energy physics. Physicists were pioneers in networking because they had humongous amounts of data coming out of these large experiments that they needed to ship around. So not all researchers in high energy physics had to be either in CERN or Hamburg. So they had a need, and also they had funding. So there was something like HEPNet. And there were others as well. And my sort of entry ticket into the EARN 40 years anniversary was not so much that I was part of EARN. I also operated an EARN node, but was that I operated some gateways between EARN and EUNet, and which is the UCP network, and other networks. Because what was the killer application then, the only one that worked across all those communities, was electronic mail. And what we did there was basically application layer gateways. So we had machines that were connected. I operated one that was connected to EARN and connected to EUNet. And on the application layer, on the mail layer, basically our mailer knew how to speak to both sides. It didn't pass packets or bits directly between those networks, but on the application layer. So mail comes in, we would look actually at the envelope in the mail and say, oh, where do we send this? Is this a local user? Is this someone on EUNet or on EARN? And would send it on. And what I learned from this is that networking is about people. Because this only worked because we knew each other. We had a common goal, even across different communities. And the people who were sort of at the interconnection points where these communities interconnected could make a great deal of, have a great deal of impact on goodness for the users. And we did that just because we wanted everybody to talk to each other. It was very new. It was exciting to be able to send files and emails, files in emails to colleagues in the US, to ask questions to colleagues in Scandinavia, and to actually collaborate on writing articles and documents much more easily. We even got software updates through the network. And before that, you had to get them on magnetic tapes, which had to go through customs and took months. But what I learned from it is basically the personal relationships. You know, just walk into this other university and say, hey, I have this network. Would you like to participate? And the goodwill you get by just basically having a common goal, that was great. And what I also learned is that in times when something new is created, those are the fun times. Pioneering is really exciting and a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Now, I think it's the time to tell you the ugly truth, okay? Because there is always some skeleton. Yes? Questions?
Yeah, maybe we can open it for some questions.
Well, one thing I want to say, and then we open for the questions, okay? So basically, if you are all here today, and you're all using happily this TCP/IP protocol stacks, it's thanks to EARN. You know why? Because when EARN started, the European Commission was completely and totally against that. Why? Because it was not a European open protocol, it was an American protocol, bad for the European industry that wanted to have their own system to communicate, right? So they started all possible attempts to tell EARN, what you're doing is illegal. You have to stop. The PTT said you cannot transfer data from countries because you're not a telephone operator. We can only do that. You cannot do that. And so forth and so forth. The Commission went up to sponsor a meeting where another organization was created named RARE that was supposed to push for these OSI protocols that Niall was trying to implement. All that was an incredibly huge smokescreen. The Commission was focused on killing EARN. They forgot about IP. They had no idea about that. And then when RIPE was born, right under this EARN umbrella. So EARN was the lightning rod, if you want, from the Commission that allow RIPE to slowly but steadily and gradually take over until it was too late. They couldn't stop it anymore, okay? And then when that happened, there was the first pan-European IP network was created called EBON in '91, thanks to our friends of SurfNet, the Dutch academic network that came up with the DSS. The OSI thing is good, but it's too far ahead. It doesn't work now. So let's create a multi-protocol backbone where we can test X25 and IP, et cetera, and then we'll see. And of course, that was also a smoke screen. All we wanted was an IP backbone, right? So that started and that developed, and EARN in, what was it, 94, pretty much, managed to migrate most of the circuits you see on this map now on the screen that were used to be kind of on synchronous, 90.6 synchronous circuits. 64, some of them, migrated to this IP backbone, thanks to one of the multiple applications of NJE that was able to turn on to IP, which was VMNet, written by Princeton University. We moved all our links over to EBON, and most of the countries also followed. And then the entire service that EARN was providing moved onto the internet, if you wish. And that's where there was no stopping it anymore. The dam was broken, and the Commission couldn't do anything anymore but say, oh, maybe this internet stuff is not so bad. Let's stop fighting it. Now, I think with this provocation, we can open the floor for the questions.
I doubt that everything's clear.
Yeah. Okay, then maybe we can talk a little bit about the bad things we did.
Well,
and the good
the things that we
did,
learned.
and what we learned, right?
Yeah, what did we learn? I mean, you have to cast your mind back to the time when, as I said, there was a complete monopoly on electronic communication. It was illegal to try and do what EARN was trying to do, because that was third-party traffic. That was such an absurd position to take for a community network that eventually the CEPT and CCITT and the PTTs decided that EARN was a community network and it was only internal traffic, and it was permitted for that purpose, no other purpose. We also learned, as Niall has just indicated, that standards are important, and whether proprietary or open, that published standards that people can use are extremely important. But we did learn that premature standards, that is, standards that are promised but don't exist, are a terrible, terrible curse. And the problem with the ISO OSI standards was that they were so detailed that they took forever to develop, and that ultimately they were never delivered what the academic and research community required. They were designed around a model of telematics. Perhaps you've heard of telematics. And that was the important business model, was you sent an inquiry to a remote big computer which sent you answers. You paid for the inquiry and you paid for the answers. This was the PTT model of communications. This model didn't work at all for the academic community. On another hat, I went to in '85, went to the United States and designed the NSFnet. Was able to do that because there was actually no national network in the United States. There were lots of mission-oriented networks, because there was a lot of money associated with the supercomputer activity to build a network, and because the TCP/IP protocols were available. And that was an extraordinary success, illustrating that if you meet the needs of the users, if you use standards, but standards that exist, and if you have a telecommunications environment that's positive and supportive, you can do amazing things in a very short period of time. It took a decade for EBON to happen, to do the same thing in Europe.
In fairness, apropos EBON, this will be very short. EBON was actually received support from from Brussels, didn't it? Funding?
No.
No?
Funding.
I'm wrong.
Funding from IBM.
Oh, that was from IBM as well. No, I thought that was the beginning of the Commission beginning to see the light, but it took them longer than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking forward to a question. We also learned, of course, that governments are two-faced.
Only two?
Minimum.
They have their agenda, and the Commission spent a lot of time in convincing the national research networks in the various countries that the Commission was going to do lots of good things to support the academic community. But its view of supporting the academic community was that the academic community would do what was necessary to support industry, because that was the point of the whole activity. And in my view, never once really helped the academic community build academic networks for academic purposes. So we learned a lot.
Yeah, from that episode, I can say by that time I was in the Netherlands, and one thing I learned from both the EARN experience, the EUNet experience, and what happened then was there's nothing good unless you do it. And if you are in an environment that at least tolerates what you're doing, it's good both for your own initiative and for that environment. The Netherlands, now you may know that there's one of the biggest internet exchanges in Europe is in Amsterdam. And I would posit that the reason why that is not because Amsterdam is such a beautiful city, or it had very good telecommunication infrastructure at the time. It didn't, but because this initiatives for running TCP/IP internet networks and interconnecting them were tolerated. Of course, when you now ask, like the city government, the country government, they say, oh, we pushed this, we supported this, we're the great heroes, we were behind you all the time. Of course they weren't, and in other countries they were actually vehemently opposed, and they were not tolerating it. But in the Netherlands there was at least tolerance. Sort of, if you did your own thing, they didn't make it impossible, and then sort of gradually it went into, well, let's use this as an interim stopgap thing, like Dennis said earlier, and so on. So I think what I learned is, if you see something that needs doing, just do it, and find the environment where it's tolerated. I'd like to take another 30 seconds, 1 minute, to talk about what my old friends had to say about current problems, and give you a bit of maybe food for thought, because yeah, all this old stuff might not be really that interesting. It's very interesting to us. It's very interesting to us. There were two things. François Flukiger was there, and he's a great hero of stuff happening at CERN at the time, both in the networking area and in the World Wide Web area. As you may know, the World Wide Web originated from Tim Berners-Lee while he was working at CERN in Geneva. Energy physicists again, they had money. And what François found out to his surprise was when he was sort of looking around on the internet on the story that you can find about how the World Wide Web originated, is this one paragraph that says the World Wide Web was invented by Tim Berners-Lee. We all know him, or should at least, and Robert Caillot, which is kind of a half-truth, because Robert didn't invent it, but he was the best person of explaining it to everybody else. So many people learned about the World Wide Web first from Robert, so they would think he invented it, but so that's fair. And what was it, Sam Walker. Sir Sam Walker. Who has heard about Sir Sam Walker?
famous,
Google
obviously.
Google
Yeah, yeah. So François found that this was in very many places, when you Googled it, that there was this paragraph that said it was Sir Tim Berners-Lee, sorry, sorry Tim, Robert Caillot and Sir Sam Walker. And it turns out, you know, I'll make the story short, is that someone spammed Wikipedia with this paragraph. So it was digital vandalism. And Wikipedia almost immediately retracted it. But the cancer was already out there. And so François and others from CERN sort of tried to exterminate it by sending mails around and say, take this down, it's not true. Over the course of a number of years, it has always cropped up again. And that is a lesson that we should all learn, is that, you know, if some misinformation is out there once, due to the hyperlink model and the web crawlers, you cannot get rid of it. Yeah. So I found that very interesting. We didn't come up with solutions here, but everybody should have that in their in the back of their minds. The other thought sort of about current things came from panellists Tsotsakis. He's obviously Greek and a famous figure here, I understand. One of the early pioneers, but also he did lots of other things for technology here. And he basically put our attention to the fact that what you see now with information and campaigns and things like that is very much a product of big platforms knowing user behavior on all levels, and not only thinking about the Googles and that tier, but also about, say, manufacturers of products like automobiles and so on, who get a lot of data about user behavior. And the question whether they should really own that data. Because if you think about it, you know, even in the political realm, in political campaigns, you know, the big platforms, social media platforms, know immediately, within minutes, whether a particular item of information or disinformation actually gets picked up and leads its life and gets shared and things like that. So they know how actually even our societal thinking works, how our political communications work, how our, well, even group communication in very definite groups work. And there's a fundamental question, is whether these platforms actually should own that kind of data. And I think we need to, and I found it very refreshing that my old colleagues who have hair color even whiter than me, and maybe some even less hair than me, are still with us and thinking about these fundamental questions. That was very, very encouraging.
It's not, though, a new question. Plato once did a Gedanken experiment, a thought experiment, and he postulated, that he asked the question, what would the unobserved man do? How would the unobserved man behave if he was truly unobserved? And having reflected on this, he concluded that the unobserved man would behave badly. We now have billions of unobserved people connected to this networking that we're so proud of. And believe it or not, we've discovered that the unobserved man, or indeed woman, behaves badly. And this is probably the most important question for society right now. I don't know if you know about RTB, real-time bidding. Hands up who know about real-time bidding? Very few of you. Real-time bidding is the system that allows people to find out who you are, look up who you are, advertise, auction an advertising space, auction the space, and put the advertisement on your web browsers in the second that it takes to scroll down. That is based on a database of culled information, extracted information about you. There are billions of records about you. Well, not about you, but there are billions of records about billions of people like you. And they cover every potential aspect of you. The way you think, the way you act, the way you perform, your sexual proclivities, your religious activities, your social activities. And that information is coordinated by a set of standards, which are promulgated by a couple of organizations, one of which is Google. And that information goes to data brokers and is sold across the globe, including to the Russians and the Chinese and the Americans and so on. This is an appalling vista that is actually a reality. And it's one of the consequences that we did not anticipate when we quite happily created communities and networking for those communities.
Correct. We are responsible, but we didn't know about it.
It's all your fault.
We didn't know about it. And just one last about what Daniel said. These things, this process is happening faster and faster. So kind of is an exponential growth. So we are basically being fed our own shit, okay? That's the way it is. So I think, Vesna, you can take over for the questions now.
Since I don't see any other people running to ask questions, I have one. I was surprised when Daniel said that the email was a killer app. So to me, that sounds like a parallel to what is happening now with all these walled gardens where people are exchanging messages, but they cannot actually communicate between the walled gardens, just like your networks, which were running on different protocols, needed these gateways, and then the email was at that time the killer app. What kind of parallel can you make based on your experience about the current situation or maybe the future situations? What could we work on? What could we expect? Something, questions based on your comment that the email was a killer app at that time. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start. I think there's lots of things you can think about here. Yes, email was the killer app because that was the only universal one. That's also why there were lots of people working unselfishly on this interconnection. Yeah. But you have to understand, sort of from the technical perspective, this does not scale. You cannot, once the user populations get so big and the volumes get very big, do things through gateways. So I don't think gateways are the panacea here. They worked then because the lines were so slow, and the population, the internet population, was so small. And the files were so small as well. Yes. About the walled garden situation, it's basically not so much the garden walls, but the critical mass. I have tried to educate, for instance, my children about informational self-disposition and do not hand off information about yourself unnecessarily. But in the beginning I had some successes, but with the advent of WhatsApp, I lost. Why did I lose? Because all their friends were on WhatsApp. And when I said, well, yeah, but you sell your behavior to a very big platform, and also at the time there was no end-to-end encryption in WhatsApp and things like that. And said, there's better alternatives. And they say, yes, Dad, we understand that the alternatives are better, but our friends are on WhatsApp. And I said, well, then recruit your friends to these other things. And they said, no, the barrier is too high. So what we have right now is wherever a big number of people congregate, there is power. There's and that is something that I have to say personally I did not anticipate. I thought universal communication would be universally good. Well, I can remember that we all sort of worked towards it, right?
Yes, we did.
Yes. So sorry, Vesna, I don't have a solution, but being aware of the problem is maybe a first step towards a solution. We've been speaking.
Remco?
Hi, Remco. Speaking as an individual, I guess. So here's a little challenge for the esteemed people right in front of me who've been at the base of all of this, because I think we have any number of interesting challenges, but the one I want to throw in front of you is one of application level interoperability. This is very complicated language for at least the ITU got one thing right, is if I pick up a phone and call someone at the other side of the world, their phone will ring and I will be able to have a conversation with them, irrespective of what network they are on. And with these walled gardens that we've built on the internet, whether, I was doing calls this morning again, and we have the wonderful world of, well, IP telephony or video calls, where everyone is using a different platform, and once you're forced to being used to use someone else's platform, you're stuck in a hellhole of having to update applications for hours on end, and in the end stuff still doesn't work, and half the meeting is about, can you hear me now? So really, with all of the interconnectivity that we've done, it's a little bit like on the technology side, creating power is typically still done by boiling water, irrespective of what kind of technology you use for doing so. What we have is an internet right now, which essentially has some open platforms like email and IRC, some somewhat open platforms like HTTP. I'm hesitating to call it open these days. And a whole sort of proprietary takes on, well, basically those three. How do we work our way out of that again?
I'd like to jump in here wearing the hat that I wear because of the role that Miriam introduced me as. And the thing is, back whenever, today I'm the vice chair of RIPE. I learned of RIPE while I was working on this OSI project and got sucked into RIPE. And it's been great. But the thing is, back then we thought, if you like to say naive techies that we were building a common good. And what we see today is the plutocratic usurpation of that common good. And that's an effect of scale. As long as we were building a small network with a few thousand nodes for a small academic and research community, originally discipline-specific or operating system specific, but as EARN developed, it became open to philosophy departments, history departments, and not just computer science and physics departments. So we thought we were building a common good. We think we succeeded in building a common good, but once the infrastructure that we had built grew to a scale that it could support this kind of plutocratic usurpation, and some of you may know of a Canadian pundit who has a much more colorful phrase for this. You can laugh at it if you like, but I prefer the more elegant one, especially since we're in Greece and the etymology of plutocracy is a Greek one. We this problem, I think, can only be addressed by people outside the technical community, bringing other professional approaches to it. And I was in a room with some of them this morning in the RIPE NCC roundtable with regulators and those kind of people that we techies have to learn to trust. And we have to, I think, for me at least, I identify the problem. And here I'm not trying to represent the community. My personal view is that here we have market shaping, market regulation necessary, consumer protection regulation necessary, and these are the approaches that have to be taken to solving the problems that have been brought about by the walled gardens, which exist only in order to funnel riches to people who are already rich.
Yes, hello. Desiree Milosevic, co-chair of the Cooperation Working Group. I really appreciate this discussion and having these hindsight things. Oh my God, what did we do wrong? And we could have more of these discussions even at the Cooperation Working Group. But I also think there's this myth: if we only do this, everything is going to be fine. And it's, I think that's the biggest myth that we have. But one thing that I wanted to ask about, actually maybe two things. One is recently I've seen this very interesting article called Rewilding the Internet, how when we try to simplify very complex systems, we tend to mainstream them and we kill all this diversity in the system. So I'll welcome some of your thoughts, what you think about that, with consolidation and everything else happening in the market. And the second one, I just like to point to this global initiative on digital empowerment that I'm part of, that are looking to create new avenues for personal data to be used just for people and possibly make money. Is this a social utopia?
I don't know about social utopias, but one of the things I think we missed in the early days was the fact that we did regulate ourselves. We the community, built networks for the community, and one of the byproducts is we did regulate ourselves, and we devoted resources at no cost to contribute to the community, like gateways for mail and so on. We did anticipate that the network would become a universal activity. Its power was so obvious. What we didn't understand is that there needed to be regulation, particularly in the dot-com boom area, where information has to be free. Idealism was the idea du jour, and it corrupted the thinking about networking and the regulation of networking. All human activity, if it is to be socially acceptable at any level, needs some power of regulation. And that has been usurped by these global monopolies, pseudo-monopolies, these large platforms. And until we find a way of accepting that there needs to be regulation, and for the technical community, informing that regulation so it isn't stupid, and that's a really important point. We are going to continue to have these large platforms whose only goal in life is to addict us to whatever their product is, enslave us and make money. And we're seeing that on oil, we're seeing that on cigarettes, or smoking, now vaping. We're seeing it on food, with ultra-processed food. The whole world has gone to a mindset that says, we will create monopolies, we'll create products that are addictive, like referral systems on social media, and we'll make lots and lots of money, and we will be so powerful, we'll be larger than most economies, and then nobody can stop us. That's the challenge for society, not just the networking people, society to address now. And the role of the technical community, as I said, is to make sure that the regulators don't do stupid stuff.
Hear, hear. And answering, if I may, just to Remco, the question of application interoperability, I think that hasn't succeeded. We have standards for interpersonal messages. Still, we have WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, la la la. We don't have standards for sort of social media platforms, but yeah, one could have that. But where is the incentive? Where is the incentive for those people who want to enslave us to be interoperable with the other people who want to enslave us? Yeah, I think Dennis is absolutely right. We have, as societies, we have to come to the conclusion that they don't own us, and we should unown them. To say it very succinctly.
If I may interject there, and sorry for interrupting the next question. One of the suggestions on platform interoperability was to enforce it. Now, the last thing I want is to have my social media, not that I'm on social media, I think it's all crap and I don't use it, but if I were, that all the other crap from all the other platforms would be enforced onto me through interoperability. So if you want to have interoperability, it would have to be at the user's discretion.
Opt-in interoperability.
Opt-in interoperability. Sorry, I'm sorry for taking the time.
Question.
First of all, I think I'm the youngest person in this room. I'm 22. I feel very lucky to be here, actually. I have very beautiful people in front of me. This is not a question. I didn't come up to ask a question, but rather talk about this Sir Sam Walker mystery. So yesterday I talked with Francois about this, a little chat. So I took some notes on what happened and what have I just done 1 hour ago. So first I'd like to say misinformation on the internet, once it's put on the internet, really, you can't make it disappear. So once it's out there, it's there. So the Sir Sam Walker wiki page.
Whether it's true or not, it's irrevocably out there.
Exactly. So the Sir Sam Walker wiki page was deleted in 2007. And after that, I believe there was no mention of this person whatsoever on the internet. That's just an opinion anyway. In 2010, so this name pops up again on a website, and then at least 3 academic papers include this name and cited that website. So
I didn't say that because it was just too painful to admit.
So yeah, well, that said, just recently I submitted a page. Actually, I revived the Wikipedia page, not yet. I submitted a draft, and this time it doesn't give you misinformation, but rather it addresses it. So. So yeah, I think the best thing we could do was to address the misinformation, at least have it on Wikipedia, so once someone comes up on the Google, searches up, who's this Sir Sam Walker person, and now they see this Wikipedia page of this person, and the Wikipedia page says, this person does not exist, is fake, and it also cites the academic paper, so a few people also get ashamed, maybe.
That's actually a terrific idea. Instead of just trying to delete it and kill the cancer, just put the anti-cancer beside it.
Exactly.
So it should self-destruct it with time.
So
Maybe
yeah.
you find the antidote. Who knows?
Well, it's still a draft, so some Wikipedia maintainer must approve it. So maybe if a lot of people here agree with me, that may be an incentive for them to approve the page to go live. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you sit down, what is it we need to do to help your initiative?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, this is my This was actually my first time submitting a page to Wikipedia. It was kind of like just an idea we had with Francois talking yesterday. So I have no idea. Maybe this is being live streamed or somehow some Wikipedia people will see it.
So if someone here knows how to deal with Wikipedia, talk to this man.
That would be brilliant. Thank you very much.
And then we will let you know after the coffee break what you have to do. Thank you, Vesna.
Thank you to all the speakers. We have 2 more minutes, so you have 30 seconds if you want to have a closing word, and otherwise, last questions, or we go and have a coffee a bit earlier.
Coffee!
Well, we can tell a joke if you want. I mean, it's just...
No, it's... when I was thinking about Remco's question and Daniel, your response, I thought that remember Leslie invented the word permissionless innovation. What did that bring us?
I'd like to address that. Permissionless innovation is a lovely idea. Today, I believe it's a myth. It's a nice aspiration, but it's no longer available to the internauts of today, unless you're part of an elite which can somehow avoid, if you're something of the scale of Internet 2 or in Europe Géant, you may be able to push ahead in the protected environment, the protected development environment there, where there is still permissionless innovation preserved. But for the rest of us doing hobbyist computing in our homes or small, micro enterprises, permissionless innovation has evaporated. I don't know what we can do to seize it back again, but that's my, with apologies for the pessimism view on permissionless innovation today.
Can you finish on a positive note, or shall I?
Dennis is going to.
Yes?
Okay. Hands up in the audience, who as part of your professional training has had a course in ethics? Yeah, not that many of you. The behavior that's within these hyper large platforms is extraordinarily unethical. The latest wave of enthusiasm for generic machine learning, AI, so-called, ChatGPT and so on, based on scouring the world for, without permission, personal information, copyright information, incorrect information, and maybe some correct information, is a gross violation of humanity, in my view.
Here, here.
And it could not have taken place without a complete lack of any ethical understanding among the technical community. Just because you're smart and you can see the door and you know how to open the door, and through that door you can see the keys of the car on the hall table, does not give you permission to go through that door and take the keys and drive away the car. It is still theft. And that's not really understood, as far as I can see, among the vast number of people who are involved in the commercial technology industry. And we need to bring back that thinking.
Okay, I think we are closing, so Vesna takes it over. I just wanted to say, don't hesitate to come during the coffee break and ask further questions to any of us. We will be there.
Thank you very much for the speakers. Thank you.